All right. Thank you for sticking with my video of my Texas Dreamin lightning pages, best practices for record pages. This is the sixth segment. In it, we are going to examine mobile. So, just a quick recap in case you're seeing this for the first time. We have talked about a simple lightning page makeover. We've talked about the goals you need to have in mind as you do this. We've talked about strategy for implementing your makeover. We've talked about two different kinds of records you're likely to encounter. And then throughout this presentation, I've been making the case that perhaps until now, mobile hasn't been ready, and perhaps the core components that Salesforce supplies aren't quite mobile ready, but you can add just a few components into your setup and you can have mobile ready applications and you can co-design them on the desktop and for mobile. Most of the participants at Texas Dreamin showed by a poll result that they don't think mobile is ready or they're not ready to support mobile, but I really would like you to challenge that precept. Your users are mobile, they are ready for mobile. Mobile just isn't for talking about anymore. I am sorry that Salesforce does not fully support mobile as in as many ways as they could or and I think should, but we will continue telling them that feedback, and I believe it will simply get better. But you absolutely can make good mobile pages now, and I have done so. And let me share with you several months worth of research in the next few minutes. So let me move on down to our mobile section. All right. So the workforce is mobile, it's distributed, and they're remote. We can support mobile. Right now, common approach to mobile. At the moment, the popular belief is that if you're going to do mobile, you need to build a mobile specific app. That's what you're going to hear from Salesforce. I think that is a bad advice. I believe you can co-design desktop and mobile at the same time now. I think it's gotten that good. Doing two different designs for mobile and desktop commits you to the ongoing maintenance, it commits you to the ongoing skill, and it turns off your users. They can't figure out how to do the same things on desktop as they do on mobile. The truth is they're going to be migrating typically from desktop to mobile. But you also have, don't overlook the stars of your mobile support team. They are the new employees. They don't know the desktop or the mobile, and if you'll start them on mobile, they will be delighted and can move equally well between desktop and mobile if you follow the design principles of these record pages. So I think your app can work on mobile. Salesforce is ready or almost so. You have to avoid some things in Salesforce, and unfortunately, they are some of the newest features. Salesforce has a bad habit of bringing out a new feature halfway done. I suppose that's a good thing because we get it sooner. But then they take another season or two to finish it. And then in many cases, they have chosen not to support the feature on mobile even yet, sometimes as much as 2 or 3 years later. I think this will get them in trouble, and I think they will stop this soon. We need to be rolling out mobile, and we need to put the pressure on them for it. So give your users an experience that is the same on the mobile and desktop. And I've demonstrated that you can do this on working records that are complicated and on long-term records that are complicated. So let's take a look at what it takes. First, you have to create some mobile knowledge on your part. You may be the reason that you're not supporting mobile. It could be your lack of knowledge about it. So you're going to have to learn what works and what doesn't work. I hope it doesn't take you 4 months of research to find that out, but it's what it took me. What components can you add to get around certain issues? What design patterns work best? And I have tried to share as much as I can of that in this presentation to save you a lot of time and money. Page templates are the foundation of Lightning. And the really good news is those were designed well, maybe in the second or third season of their existence, and they're going on what, 5 or 6 years now. In the first few seasons, they were designed to work well on mobile. They adapt and they reflow. When you choose a page template, it's going to tell you how it works on mobile. The only caveat is if you have gone down the path of creating your own custom templates, you might not have supported mobile, and so you might have to finish the job. But templates from Salesforce work really well. The typical reflow is simply that the different elements are shown side by side on the desktop, and they reflow to be vertical elements on mobile. And it's what users expect. They're comfortable with it, and it seems to work really well. Tabs work really good, in my opinion, also, and they seem to be quite user friendly. Horizontal tabs that have names are essentially our little links that the user picks on to move to a new sub page, and those transform themselves magically on mobile into a vertical set of sub menu items that the user clicks on, and that expands into a full page view of whatever's on that tab. And that seems very intuitive and very natural. Empty tabs disappear. So in the next iteration of this app that I built here, we have a hide tab that's there to make to allow on the desktop that you pick it and then conserve all the space that was being used by the tab component that whatever's picked. So essentially, it's allowing you to pick an empty tab. Turns out you don't need to do that on mobile. And the mechanism that we use to create that hide tab is a rich text component that is blank. But we have already experimented and learned that if we make that only visible on the desktop, the hide tab works just fine like we expect it to. And because it's not visible on the mobile, that whole tab hides itself on mobile. And so we don't see this useless tab or this useless submenu called hide that is kind of confusing on mobile. So, but the bottom line is tabs work great. If you use the little trick that I learned from someone to add a hide tab, you'll also want to learn how to make it disappear on mobile. But it works great. Screen flows embedded on a page also work really well. They work well on the canvas. They make good use of the canvas on the desktop. They even understand the concept of multiple columns on the desktop, and they reflow nicely onto mobile. I do recommend putting most flows that are embedded on a tab, and probably not making it the tab that is selected by default, so they can lazy load. Flows load a little bit later than most other components on the page, and that can be upsetting to your user. So if it's on a tab, that tends to give a much better user experience, and that tab becomes a submenu on mobile, and so it expands and takes up the whole space, and you get the entire available screen for the wizard or the flow. So flows embedded on a page work really well, and I recommend putting them inside of a tab component. The Record Detail app is an add-on. It's from Salesforce Labs. If your governance allows you to bring in third-party components, I recommend this one. It doesn't seem to get updated very often, so it's not going to create a cost of ownership problem as things need to get updated all the time. And it works really well. It gives you a very good Lightning look and feel. It gives you the pencil icon for whatever feels you want, and exactly the same experience on mobile. Unfortunately, dynamic forms only works on desktop. You don't get that experience on mobile. So recommend that you download that from the App Exchange if your governance allows, and give it a try. Dynamic buttons work really well, but there's a little bit of confusion. Dynamic buttons typically come from the highlight component, which you may or may not be using, but dynamic buttons on desktop work really well, and I think they are now available on I'm not going to say that. I don't remember now. Dynamic buttons have rolled out slowly. It's a feature that has rolled out slowly, and again, an example of Salesforce doing things in a piecemeal fashion. I believe they have enough resources to do things better than that, and I would like to see them stop giving us component functionality that is not across the board. But anyway, dynamic buttons work well on the desktop for simplifying the choices and making some of the choices that are most important appear first. If you slowly reveal the choices that the user needs to go with in a process-oriented record, it's really nice because the buttons that they need next are right there and easily found. Those same buttons appear on the desktop across the top of the record, and there's a more button to pull down all the rest of them. It's quite nice. There are two places you might need to look to control the dynamic buttons on a mobile record. If the highlight panel is on your page, that's where you control it if you want to. But if you click on just the page component, that's the same panel in the page editor where you can edit the title of the page. On many pages now, you will see at the bottom the opportunity to override the mobile dynamic buttons only. And so in that case, you're controlling the mobile dynamic buttons separate from the highlight panel buttons. And that's kind of nice in situations where you want one set of buttons showing up on desktop for some reason and a slightly different set showing up. Now, I did find one other little gotcha. If your users are comfortable with the global publisher action menu on the desktop, that's the plus sign over in the far right corner next to the setup icon and the user icon. If they're using that to access some quick actions that are global in nature, that's not available on mobile in an easy to find way. And so what you will want to do is on mobile only, you will want to add in the dynamic actions selections your global actions. And so we have duplicated the global actions as dynamic actions and made them conditional on the mobile form factor. That way, you can still get to all the things the user is used to clicking on the plus. You just have to retrain them to say, no, it's one of your buttons. It's just they're combined. And that seems to be a pretty easy user paradigm. We've found that users can find it on their own often. And so anyway, dynamic work buttons are really good. And you can put your global publisher action buttons there. There might even be a case for getting rid of the global publisher action menu choices you have now and moving them all to dynamic buttons on both desktop and mobile. All right, there are a number of components that work, but they take a lot of space and potentially too much space unless you have a lot of value coming from them on the page. The highlights panel is really big, and unfortunately, it can't be configured to be collapsed by default. You can close it, but on the desktop, you can force it to be closed by default, but you can't do that on mobile. The path component is also very big, and I pointed out during some of the mobile demos that we chose to put it at the bottom for that reason. So those are some components that work, but take up a lot of space. We would like to see more compact versions of that in the future, or alternative components we could use, perhaps. All right, there are a couple that have, in particular, one or two that have very different behaviors that are disconcerting. The single related list is a component we probably all like to use on our desktop, and there is a better version of that coming automatically in summer 2022 called the dynamic related list that allows you to filter and only show part of the related list. That's being delivered in piecemeal fashion. It's about 90% complete, except for mobile in its initial version, and they presumably they will complete the implementation of it in the next season, and we don't know if and when they will roll it out to mobile. But unfortunately, the single related list gives very different behavior desktop and mobile. it even gives different behavior between 1/3 columns and half or 2/3 or full columns. Um, we recommend using Enhanced Lightning Grid instead because of this. But anyway, on the desktop, you will see a nice two-dimensional array of your related records. On mobile, you will see a sub-menu item that says you have 3 or more of these, and then you will see tiles rather than a two-dimensional array of information. And that just really messes with the user's head and requires a whole lot of button pushing, and we recommend using Enhanced Lightning Grid instead. Another item that unfortunately looks quite different is will be the dynamic related list component. While I love the idea of dynamic related list, we can get exactly the same function from Enhanced Lightning Grid already, and so I recommend that instead until that functionality is completed and ready for both mobile and desktop and functionally complete. But you may, if you don't use mobile, you may love it in summer 2022. And then there are some things that unfortunately simply do not work. The related list component cannot be configured to edit on mobile. I'm sorry, the related record component is a great little component, allows you to show, the account key fields on a contact, allows you to display display a related record. There's a hack that allows you to display subsets of fields on a record, but on mobile, it cannot be used in edit mode, which defeats most of its purpose. So unfortunately, the related record component isn't friendly to this mobile and desktop co-design. The global publisher, I've already mentioned. Flow buttons are really wonderful on the desktop. You can add a button and pop up a modal flow or a wizard that takes over the screen, but you only part of it, and you can cycle through your wizard and get some things done, close it, and the Lightning page updates when you do that. It's really nice. It does exactly the same thing on mobile, but unfortunately, it does not understand that it probably should commandeer the entire screen rather than only take up, as a modal might, some of the screen. And the screen real estate is just too small on mobile to work in that fashion. Dynamic fields just aren't available. Use the record detail app instead. And we've already talked about related lists, just not working that well, and that you should use Enhanced Lightning Grid instead, in my opinion. So strategy. Once you've accumulated your knowledge, then you can begin to come up with a strategy to make this work. Work around the space using objects. Put spacing objects at the bottom of the page instead of the top. Use the best behaving components. And deploy it in a beta or A/B type situation, and let your users begin to experiment with it. Let your new users use it first, because they don't know any different. Let your adaptable users who want to be mobile go, or maybe do it based on need. Our shoppers really like updating our inventory in the store or the sources in the store. Our inventory taker really likes updating the inventory in the closet, where they're seeing the product, instead of having to write it all down and take it back to a computer. So that is our presentation. I've covered our favorite apps, add-ons. We have many others that we tried, and they just didn't behave well on mobile and desktop, so I couldn't recommend them. Record Detail app is really nice. Enhanced Lightning Grid is really nice. They are both free. They are both from Salesforce. Launch Flow in Modal is really nice, but it doesn't work that well on mobile because there's just not enough screen real estate to do the modal concept. That component needs to be rewritten to take over the entire screen and then close it. But that's where we are today. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I look forward to your questions. You can correspond to me at my email address or by making comments on this YouTube watch list, and I will try to respond. Thanks very much for your time. I do hope you've enjoyed this little workshop series. Thanks very much. Bye.